So, welcome everybody who's watching to the Centrist Central podcast. Today we have a very special guest. I'm your host, Joe Bao, with my co hosts, Parker Anal, Danifet Chananukul, and Mingyu Choi. And today our very special guest is a high school teacher from St. Louis, Missouri. She teaches statistics and math at Parkwood North High School. Her name is Mrs. Jennifer Mueller. Thank you very much for joining us. And
Hello, thank you.
let's get started. So as you may have heard going into this, we're talking a little bit about the logistics of moving everything to online classes. What do you think the practicality or the effectiveness of online classes for high school students are, Ms. Miller?
Well, it's going to be a new experience for most of the teachers and the students. We've been doing some personalized learning in my school district, Parkway, for a few years. So there's been select students that have done virtual courses. And based on student perseverance, I guess, is their success level in those virtual classes. So now with COVID, it looks like everybody's going to get that experience, and we're all going to try to make sure everybody's successful.
Right. And so, what has the process been like in reopening schools for? Um, because all the classes are online, right? It's not like a hybrid.
Correct. For the first 9 weeks, Parkway has decided that those classes will be definitely online. Our school switched the structure, not just our school, our districts switched the structure of what our typical high school year looks like. When you gentlemen were in high school, we had semesters that were 18 weeks long. We are now going to a quarter system where you're going to learn a semester of material in 9 weeks because you're only taking 4 classes. So by saying that we're taking the first 9 weeks virtually, you're saying all of semester one for those 4 classes will be done virtually.
So are classes just longer then, like per day?
One would think that, but no. Because you meet every single day with those 4 classes, you're going to have in our schedule, you'll have a 50-minute class you can do synchronously with the teacher and the rest of the class, or it could be asynchronous. But there will also be time allotted before and after school that you'll be working on work as well. So like in virtual world, school doesn't start till 10 a.m. and the students are done by 2:20 with a break in there for lunch.
And is
So I
attendance?
think a lot of you high school kids would have liked that, being able to sleep in a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit longer.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
I would have liked that for better or worse for my my academic career. But is
You could stay up
attendance?
to 4 a.m. and still be able to be successful in school.
Yeah. Is attendance required then if they have like allotted times that they have to show up?
Yes. So a student has to log into our online learning system, which is known as Schoology, and they will, at the beginning of each one of the blocks, and that's when a teacher can say, here's today's lesson. You guys may go learn it asynchronously or stay on and we will learn it together. It just kind of depends on how a teacher wants to set up their class time.
Is the school providing laptops for kids, or is it more of a like if you don't have it, they'll just provide one? Or
Yeah, so every student will have a Chromebook, which is a touchscreen Chromebook, and they're going to have a program called Cami on it, so they can write on the PDFs and be able to save it and send it in for their homework. So they're not sitting there having to write it out by hand, take pictures, load it, and all that stuff. Teachers, of course, have their laptops, and I think a few of us have brought home like all kinds of technology in order to make our teaching experience as similar as it is in the classroom.
And so for you, you teach AP Stats, and when we had you, you also were teaching Algebra 2 Trig. I don't know what else you might be teaching. How do you think those type of courses fares online as opposed to other courses that a lot of people say that you can't really imitate that in-person experience online? Like, say anything that's like in the fine arts department or I don't know, like philosophy or things like that.
Mhm. So I'm teaching AP statistics first quarter, and I'm also going to be doing a remedial algebra 1 course. And those are students that don't like math and haven't been successful. So that's actually a class I'm pretty concerned about because building relationships is a big deal in order to make connections with students who struggle. AP Stat I'm worried about because there's a lot of material that you want to have a student prepared to do well on the AP exam, and that's a national exam. So your teaching, their understanding is being measured against everyone across the country. And so you want to make sure that students are prepared for that. Plus, it's a college credit opportunity for students. When it comes to the personalization and being able to do different things, there's going to be activities, obviously, that a math teacher can't do like we could in the classroom. When it comes to like ceramics, you can't do that virtually. Not everybody has the clay and the wheel and all that. So those classes are getting pushed back into later semesters or later quarters, I should say, so that if we do go back in person, at least students have an opportunity to take those maybe in quarter 3 or quarter 4.
That makes
So
sense.
I was talking to some English teachers, and English, there's huge discussion conversations and like reading Hamlet together as a class and acting out scenes. And so we were discussing different ways to be able to do that through Zoom, maybe putting kids in breakout rooms in order to practice a scene or figure out what they're going to do and then pull them together, record things. But it's a major learning curve for teachers who didn't learn how to do this. Like we're people. Like we like to talk to people. And so,
Yeah.
and the interactions with students is huge, building those relationships with students. So this is basically learning your entire profession over very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
you
know
mentioned.
the summer. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just gonna say real quick. You mentioned the AP exam. Did the AP board exams or whatever the higher ups over the AP departments, did they mention anything about changing their expectations for the exams or what they're gonna be testing on with a lot of schools having like different curriculums or?
So that's College Board. And College Board in the spring, when COVID hit, decided to do all the tests virtually. So students were able to take them at a specific time. They had to log in and they had a limited amount of time in order to take a test. So I'm an AP reader. I've been doing that for, gosh, I think 6 years or so. And I can tell you the behind the scenes stuff it took in order to pull that off. The test creators had less than 5 weeks to come up with a brand new test and a new system that wasn't something that students would have time to Google or use Discord to chat and all this other stuff, which I'm sure there was cheating that happened. They caught kids and they didn't get scores. But they had, I know on statistics, they had 2 different questions that they had to answer. One question was 15 minutes, they had 15 minutes to do, and the other one was 25 minutes. And each one had 5 parts and one had 6 parts. So yes, they've thought through it all. They've changed their expectations. They did not assess on chapters that the majority of the US did not finish. So they did do some abbreviated testing on that part. And overall, the kids did very similar to what they did in previous years.
That's good to hear. And just for anybody who's watching that might not be familiar with the abbreviations, AP stands for Advanced Placement, and that's classes and courses that you take in high school that allows you to take a test to receive college credit actually before you enter university. I know not all schools have that. Whenever we went to Truman, there are actually quite a few people who I talked to who didn't have college credit opportunities in high school, and that kind of was mind-boggling for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's several teachers at our school that have their masters in their subject, so they're able to offer college credit through just a university rather than taking the AP test. And the University of Missouri St. Louis is actually working with us in order to still offer credit, even though we're doing virtual classes.
Wow.
Sorry, Parker. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I know throughout the summer it seems like a lot of schools were going back and forth. Are we gonna just go to school and wear masks? Or are we gonna do online? So I'm wondering how that was for your school. If they just recently made the final decision to keep it online, or if they did consider bringing people back with masks and social distancing.
So there were several groups that met and helped put their input in, but ultimately the Board of Education makes the decision, listening to the superintendent and principals and teacher groups. These were like secret groups of teachers and parents and staff members that discussed what are topics that they need to consider when choosing which phase of the plan to start in. So we do have a hybrid model that's possible that we could be doing. Currently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Parkway decided that they were going to switch to an all virtual model. I know my own children who are going to high school. One's in high school, the other one's headed to high school. In their district, fourth grade and up is going virtually, and third grade and down is going in person. So I think what they're probably doing is using the fourth and fifth grade classrooms to spread out the students that are attending every day in that younger grades. And I think that that's probably because, depending on how old the kid is, I mean, learning is so much different. I can't imagine being an elementary school teacher. I mean, how do you teach some of the skills when you can't even work with them? And then parents have struggles with if they're going to be at home able to help those students, because that's where they want to be, but yet they also have a responsibility to make money so that they can afford the house that everybody lives in. So it's a tough time.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That was one of the questions I was going to ask was how you felt about kind of like incremental implementations of going like in school classes as opposed to online classes for different grade levels. And I think that's a smart way to do it. I don't know if like the cutoff for between third and fourth grade I necessarily agree with, but maybe there's more like practical reasons why they chose that. But I think that's just a good idea, just because like aside from learning basic things like simple mathematics and like I don't know, learning about Christopher Columbus and things like that back in elementary school, just as like a younger kid, like the other huge benefit to going to school, aside from childcare for the parents, is just learning to interact with others. From a psychology perspective, I took a couple of classes about child psychology and things like that, and it's just like the benefit of kids interacting with other kids and learning to work through their emotions with others in a social and in-person environment like cannot be overstated. And so I think that's a really good idea that I guess is for Lindbergh, right? Because you said that's for your kids' schools. Yeah. So I think that's a really smart thing for Lindbergh to do, where they have kindergarten to third grade going in person for that benefit. Is Parkway doing something similar?
No, Parkway is all virtual to my knowledge. Not that I don't pay attention to what's happening in Parkway, but I'm really focused on the high school aspect since that's my job and I oversee the math department. But I believe they're all virtual. Lindbergh's the only one that I know of that's doing like some kind of a split like that. And I think one major reason is those younger grades is when a student learns to read. And so you've got to have someone who's trained in order to reach and teach those students to be able to understand the English language and break down words and put sentences together and such. And that's a skill that they're going to need for the rest of their life. So putting that skill off or leaving that, not that parents can't teach that, but parents aren't trained to do that like an elementary teacher is. So those are huge things that we need students to be able to do.
I have heard in middle school, this is still Parkway, that although their classes are virtual, they're allowing extracurricular activities, like they still have football practices. Is that the same for the high school?
So right now we're all on hold. I think they're doing conditioning practices. I know the cheer squad is doing virtual cheer practices. Um, I can talk about my own children at Limburg. They are doing conditioning, but they're only doing it in pods. So you're only with 10 or less students. They tried to keep families together so that that's less contact with other families. Uh, and they've still had outbreaks of COVID among the football team. I think almost
Yep.
every high school in St. Louis has had an outbreak of COVID amongst the football teams because they all started doing conditioning and stuff um, back in June.
Did your kids
We're
attend
just
the
not allowed
conditioning?
to have. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, did your kids attend the conditioning then?
They did when they were in pods or they were outside. I let them do the conditioning. I will not let my kid drive other kids around without masks on, and then we wipe the car down still. We're just trying to be as safe as possible. My husband's 15 years older than me, so I want to make sure that he doesn't get sick because he's very near that at risk group. Um, and plus, who wants to get sick if you can
Right.
avoid it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Very
Yeah, I
interesting.
think that is kind of worrisome, especially with the younger age groups. It seems like they could be easy or spread it very easily. So I know the school's probably going to have to monitor them pretty closely, just because even adults don't always you know take the precautions. So a kid's probably not going to know what's going on when they're playing with their friends and things, and then going home at the end of the day. So it should be interesting how that goes.
And to be clear,
but
we
I think kids are better about keeping their masks on than adults. Adults seem to be the ones that whine all the time and get annoyed at it all and complain. Our kids just kind of deal with it. I mean, and
Yeah,
if they don't know better, then just stop complaining, adults, to the kids and let them have that experience.
yeah. Have you had any? I know. Have you had any parents that have not agreed with the move to virtual, and maybe they have a kid that they don't want to have at home, and they're complaining to you or to other teachers? Do you run into that?
Absolutely. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, whether they're coworkers, whether they're teachers in another district, whether they're parents that are in this, either one of the districts I'm part of or different districts. Everybody has an opinion. Uh,
Yeah,
and I don't know, it can range from a multiple of reasons. Um, as to maybe they don't have childcare and they need to be at work. Maybe they can't deal with their kids anymore. They've, had them at home for 5 months and they're like, get them out of my hair. Um, Parents aren't, trained to be teachers either. So it's up to the teachers who are creating the virtual classes and experience to make sure that their students are engaged. Um, and that's what I keep trying to tell my friends and anybody that I talk to really is that's on the teacher. Like the teacher's going to help with that. All we ask from a parent, hopefully, is that you get your kid up just like you do during the school year, you know?
right. Hmm.
Um, but we'll see. I mean, it's a big change for everybody all the way around.
Yeah.
and so
Another, go ahead.
now you go ahead, Mingyu.
I said another thing that I was concerned about, like just putting myself back in high school shoes. Um, I still struggle with like online courses right now. Like even though I'm getting the same material, it's a struggle for me to just sit in front of my computer for an hour and a half. Do you have concerns whether like students will actually take in the material just because like it's so hard to focus when you have to sit in one spot in front of a computer for so long?
Oh, I hear you. It was interesting. My own two boys took an online health class this summer. And so watching them experience that and even sitting with them occasionally, helping them to experience that, making sure that they're on task, making sure that they're understanding what's being taught was quite an eye opening experience, to be honest, as an educator and a parent. It is tough. I mean, I've been working like 10-hour days trying to set up my classes right now. and use a program that I've had to watch videos on how to do certain things, Google things that I can't figure out, try to make engaging videos so it's not just watching a video for 40 minutes, which would suck. But like putting slides in there so that that is interactive, so that a kid isn't just staring at their screen, listening to someone drone on and on and on. It has to be engaging, has to be short clips, has to be discussions. I think one of the perks about us moving to this semester system that's 9 weeks is our quarter system that's 9 weeks is that the kids are going to see the math every single day. And so you don't have time to really forget stuff. But then on the other hand, you don't have time to really put stuff into long-term memory either because you're moving so quickly. So it has to be engaging and rich enough for a student to understand what's going on.
I will say, if it's any consolation, the point about things not going to long-term memory because of a 9-week course as opposed to a whole semester-long course, I don't know what the difference would be, but for me personally, even if it's a semester-long course, I'm forgetting a lot of it very quickly afterward. Like, I don't know. I've only been out of school for a little over
Don't
a
go
year,
breaking my heart.
no, I've only been out of school for a little over a year now, but if you ask me, if I were to take like all the tests I did, like all the last tests I took, oh man, it would not be pretty. But I mean, I don't know what the difference would be. Like, I don't know if it's like, let's just say right now I only retain like 20% of what I learned. I don't know if it would be like closer to 5% or something if I only took the course for 9 weeks. So, but I mean, yeah, if that's any consolation to you as a teacher.
Fair enough. I'm worried. And so I like using that train of thought. You've got parents, some parents are going to be at home helping their kids learn material, right? Well, a parent's been out of high school or elementary school for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes. So that's a lot of stuff to not remember. The perk
Yep.
about myself is like I'm in the subject. I'm in high school technically still, like always hearing kids and helping kids with various subjects. So me helping my own children isn't as hard for me because it's still fresh in my head. But for other parents who don't have it fresh in their head, they're like, I can't do this. So, and what worries me about this quarter system is that a kid could take, let's say, AP Stat in quarter one, but not see second semester AP Stat till quarter 3 or 4. So you're talking about 18 weeks in between, 9 to 18 weeks in between before they even see the second semester of a course. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, just not even parents. Like my girlfriend recently just took an online stats class for the summer, and like I was pretty good at stats in college. I think it's probably one of my best subjects. And then she's like, "Can you help me?" And I'm like, "Sure." I looked at it. I recognize all the words and stuff like that, but I could not help her at all.
Oh, well, you should have hit me up.
I'm like, Anova, I should know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Connie was also showing me some stuff for stats for her intro to chem class, and I was just like, oh man, this is like this is very basic stuff I learned back in high school, and I still don't remember how to do this.
Well, hopefully you used Google or YouTube because that is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
hmm
So I don't know how much you're able to speak on this, but what is like the general consensus for the teachers that you've spoken with about reopening schools in general? Do they think that online is the way to go, or like
Well, I
hybrid?
think right now it's just, the unknown is, I think, what's scary. You don't know how quick something's gonna spread. You don't know. I mean, it spreads quickly, but like how soon till we get a first case? And then from that case, it's gonna, it can go exponentially depending on who's touched what surface or been near somebody. There's so many different ways. And then what do those people take home to their families? I mean, there are students that live with their grandparents or live in a home that is tight quarters. So that you are in each other's airspace a lot more than if you had a very large home. It can be scary. So teachers, I think, for the most part, the ones I've talked to, we're kind of 50-50. Parkway let us decide if we want to be a virtual teacher or if we want to be an in-house teacher. And so there's a good number of teachers that chose both sides for various reasons. Some it's because of what they have in their own personal life. It might be easier to stay home, or it might be easier to go to school and be a teacher. But like I said earlier, we're taught to be teachers in front of students in a classroom interacting. So like that's where your heart is, where you really want to be there. But then you have to weigh the pros and cons for what it could bring to your family.
Yeah, we'll say, the precautions seem kind of overkill until somebody gets a case. I know with my company that I work for, they brought people back a little too early, and they weren't really enforcing masks and things. And then everyone's pretty much fine about it until there's a case, and then everybody really changes their behavior. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be around where the person was. So I think it's a good idea to kind of, if you can be virtual, I think it does help.
That's actually
Yeah, they were talking about like some of the rules that they're going to have to do in the buildings, like divide the hallways with tape or something in order to like say on this side you have to walk this direction, on this side you have to walk this direction, or having the hallways only flow one direction. So if you were in a classroom, like maybe you were in a math classroom and you had to go to the bathroom. Well, the closest bathroom is out the math department to the left. But if the hallway only can go to the right, they've got to walk the entire loop just to get over there in order to use the restroom and then come back to school. Back to class. So they're trying to think through different things like that. They're taking desks and they're spacing them out to see, not just 6 feet forward and backwards, but 6 feet on the angle, and they're talking about, there's a lot of precautions. In elementary schools, they were putting up partitions in between desks so that they've got these clear partitions in the pods so that students can still work together, but not sneeze on each other or whatever. It's unreal because we live in a society that is litigious. As soon as a kid gets sick, how do we know that a parent's not going to sue the district because that's where my kid got sick from? And God forbid if a student passed away, what that would do. It's just, the school district has to protect themselves. The teachers have to protect themselves. Families need to protect themselves. It's a very tough decision, and nobody's really winning in it. It's just everybody's having to adapt.
Yeah, and if teachers or if students did come back, it seems like everybody takes COVID a little bit differently depending on if they have someone that they know that's vulnerable, like an older parent or something. So I think if you did bring everybody back, you're right. Like it would be, if one kid gets it, all the parents are going to go crazy because they're like, okay, I want my kid at school now. And then you have to rapidly make that change, So, and rather than starting virtual first, it seems like.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Part of me says that, and I have no idea, so don't think that I know anything beyond the first quarter. Part of me wonders when we'll go back, if we go back this year. Will it happen before there's a vaccine? And then you've got parents that don't want to vaccinate their students anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So then that's another whole game changer. And you've got parents that refuse to wear masks and then their kids pick up those habits. And it's like, it's just, I wish, I really wish.
Problem. They can't wear the mask.
Yeah, they try to say, oh, I've got, breathing issues and I can't wear a mask. I really wish we would have just stopped complaining as a society and back in April and May just worn the stinking mask, stayed in your house, got the disease to quiet down, and then parents wouldn't feel like they're homeschooling their kids.
Yeah.
They want it both ways sometimes, and it's just, you can't have everything. You got to make some sacrifices.
And we're still, it's crazy that some people are still debating if masks are effective. Like even people that I work with, they're like, masks don't do anything. I'm like, wait, are we really like having this discussion right now? I mean, something over your face is clearly going to be better than nothing,
Yeah, 5 months into this. Yeah.
And it's like, I just don't know how do you get to the point like that in modern day society where, people are debating that. It's almost like kind of a conspiracy, it seems like.
Yeah, there's been a lot of those theories. I mean, I think of like Asian cultures or countries that wear masks all the time because of the air pollution. It's like, come on, you don't see them complaining. I know they've had to do it for years, but it's possible until we get vaccines and people start actually vaccinating that we'll be wearing masks for years.
It doesn't seem like we're going to get out of it. I think we're still getting like 50,000 new cases a day in the U.S., which seems just insane. That's not even the highest we've been. I think it was, 80,000 just a few weeks ago. So it's like, how are we still at this point?
Well, and I also there's debates on that, and this is probably not the right podcast for that, on why some of those numbers are as big as they are, or if people can get this once your antibodies have gone out of your system. There's a lot of debates out there.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. A lot of people will instantly question the numbers, and it's like, well, we do know one thing: it is still spreading. So the numbers can be 10K less or higher. It's still the same, thing that we need to do, which is just, practice what the scientists are telling us to do, at least in my opinion. But
Yeah, if it's any consolation, I heard that in other European countries that have already opened up schools before us, that they haven't seen a huge outbreak among their schools, specifically among the teachers. Because I know that's one of the points of contention, is that maybe the kids won't be as at risk because generally it's shown that younger age people don't seem to be as adversely affected by coronavirus. But the more high risk people will be the teachers and the faculty. But according to this this study, I don't know, I didn't look into the specifics. I wasn't able to find it, but
You didn't check if it was a truthful study and all the fun stuff we talked about.
Well, it's just she didn't quote the study specifically. She just said that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she just said that in places like Germany and Sweden, after they have opened up the schools, they found that the teachers didn't seem to be at any more risk than just anybody else in the regular population.
Interesting.
Right.
I'd want to know the biasness of the story.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was trying to look it up before this so that I'd have a little more basis, but
Talking to a stats teacher.
Yeah.
You gotta come with your facts.
Yeah.
Well, here's a fact for you. Apparently, there was a poll that was taken that like up to 35% of Americans within this poll said that they would not take the vaccine if there was one to come out.
I have heard this. That's yes, what I was alluding to. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to open, big venues, baseball games. I mean, the list could be endless. Anything where you've got large quantity of people gathering. Schools is just like a base level large group. When you could have one or two people that have it and it just spreads exponentially then. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. The MLB, they got under a lot of heat for how they approached reopening or restarting their season compared to.
And that was only the teams. Imagine when you have the fans in there,
right,
and the workers in there. I mean, oh my goodness. I society needs to get their head wrapped around this, that this is not about one person, but it's about all people.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned your.
Another thing,
Sorry, Mickey. Go ahead.
go ahead, Joe.
No, I was gonna. I was gonna.
Another thing, it's it's a little off topic from what we were talking about, but another thing that I was curious about is, like, I know some parents rely on schools to feed their kids,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a form of childcare
Mm-hmm.
that's, been very expensive in the US. So, like, for them, it makes sense to open because, like, they don't have enough money to send their kids to childcare, and they can't be home because they have to go to jobs and whatnot. So, what's like Parkway doing specifically, or what do you know of school districts to help those parents?
So the school districts are still doing meal programs for students of need, those students that are in the free reduced lunch category. They were doing in the spring specifically, they were doing pickups for meals. So a parent just had to drive through, I guess give their ID number or whatever, and they were able to pick up meals. When COVID started rising even more in the area, instead of doing it daily, they were doing it like weekly meals, sending home like a brown bag weekly meal for each kid. Um, so I know they're doing that kind of stuff. And I know as for some districts are offering childcare for teachers. I know there's some districts that are doing that for teachers because being at home, being a teacher, and then still having, if you have little ones running around trying to also be mom or dad, is going to be pretty difficult when you have your expectation of here. If you're a parent and you are used to sending your kids to school and getting that quote unquote free childcare for 7 hours a day while your student learns, that's that is a totally different situation that is beyond what I've thought about because I'm not in that situation. But there are many that are. Um, I know some of my friends have paired up with other families in order to take turns who, being able to work 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week or something like that. Uh, it's going to hit families even more.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I heard an interesting, I guess, thought experiment, if you will, where it's like if we don't open back up schools, but then people who aren't working at home, like essential workers, they have to go to work. Like who's gonna watch the kids? And then they say
Mm-hmm.
not only is it hard to find like babysitters or people to watch over the kids already, but it's like the people who do typically watch over the kids are typically like older. They tend to be in the
Mm-hmm.
older demographic, and those are like the most at-risk people. And they're having to watch kids who knows where they've been, who knows how good they've been about social distancing and wearing masks or whatever. And it's just like if we don't open back up schools and have the risk there, it's not that that risk is nullified. It's potentially just rerouted to other places and to other people.
Well, I think it's by saying, yes, by saying that it's, the risk is elsewhere, but then your group that you're interacting with is smaller, so you can control some of those variables a little bit better. I think of, I have a friend who's a teacher in another district, has two small kids who are going to be doing virtual. Luckily, she has family that's in town. And so those kids are going to be over at grandma and grandpa's every day learning virtually because she's got her job to be able to teach others. Not all families have that kind of opportunity to be able to rely on someone else. But the downside would be if those kids were at school, if they were going to school, then they might not be able to go see grandma and grandpa because they're in a high risk category. And those students were just exposed to a larger viral dose, let's say, from being at school. So there's pros and cons on both sides.
Yeah, and even non-essential workers that are, working from home. Like, I mean, I've been working from home for a few months now, and like most of the day you are working. You can't really sit and
Yep.
help the kid. Even if you are home, it's not like you can just drop what you're doing and go help your kid with homework for an hour. It is still I don't know. I mean, I don't have kids, so I don't know what it's like to be working at home with kids, but I imagine it's very difficult. Like I think it's with the distractions and things. I think it's maybe even an equal enough challenge doing that.
In the spring, when we went into this emergency situation and we were all suddenly found ourselves at home, um, I had one of my kids was in eighth grade in the spring, and the other one was a freshman in high school. And then I taught my seniors. So
Mm-hmm.
I would wake my kids. I I love them to death, and they worked with me because they wanted me to be able to help them. So they woke up. My own children would wake up at 8 a.m. and get started on their work, just like if they were going to school. But they would get up and like, okay, we need to get working, because I was finding that my seniors weren't getting up till like 11 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so I told my children, I'm going to still have my computer on. I'm going to check emails, make sure my stuff's ready for the emergency learning today. But I'm going to also be available to help you in the morning till about 11 or so. And then once my students start getting on and needing help, I'm got to be teacher. It worked out great, but that was because I have two children that are disciplined enough that knew that they wanted my help and were willing to work around when I'm available to give that assistance. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I also have friends that have kids in the exact same grades that can't get their kids to do anything. So I'm not really sure what goes on in that, those houses on how you can't get your kids to do any work, but that is a struggle.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that your remedial math course is one that you're particularly concerned about, and that's what a lot of people are concerned about, like the underprivileged kids or families, households, or just kids that struggle in school for one reason or another. Um, that's one of the main concerns is that online classes, like in-person class, is hard enough. The online class is gonna it may make or break some of these kids. Um, how is that something that was addressed by the administration of like how to approach, I guess, more at-risk kids differently?
Well, we haven't really had time to like do any professional development on that. I think it's based on a teacher's personality and heart, to be perfectly honest. Uh, when I selected teachers in the math department to teach some of the intervention classes for students that are major strugglers, we're trying to give them more time in order to learn material and have another teacher to be able to interact with. Part of it was, looking at teachers and saying, who is going to be able to be patient enough and able to build those relationships and has room in their schedule to be able to do this, because it's going to take time. I'm looking at you guys in a screen, but I know you guys from past experience. I'll be looking at 10 kids, let's say, who I don't know from any past experience. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't have any of that relationship built. So doing that and being able to help them make connections with math is going to be a real struggle, and it's going to take
Mm-hmm.
compassion.
So
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. With if you haven't met someone, it's really crazy how that if we're trying to communicate with them online. I know, like with my company, new employees, for example, like I've never met them, and I just don't feel as much of a uh, you know working together feeling with them as the people that I've met previously. And I think with students, maybe that's they may not have to feel the obligation to the teacher student relationship may just not be maybe not be able to foster that without meeting them in person. But I don't know. Would you? Maybe you could do one-on-ones with the students. I don't know how that would work, but
Yeah, just trying to think through and process what I want my courses to look like and how I'm going to foster those kind of relationships, because those of you that have had me before, that I like to talk to the students about real life stuff, not just math. Um, and you get to know students on a different level that way. So one thing that I'm starting on the very first day, I made a Google slide or a Google yeah, I guess it's a slideshow, where I'm creating an about me and get to know your classmates kind of thing. So every student will be able to go in there, duplicate a page, put some pictures in there, tell us a little bit about themselves, talk. The thing with the students is they know each other already. It's me that
Hmm.
doesn't know them, you know.
Right.
And there are, just like in any high school, there are cliques, there are groups that know each other better than others. So I think it'll be an interesting thing to see what kind of pictures they chose to put up there. What kind of one of the questions I put on there is, what do you think about this e-learning, not e-learning, distance learning, virtual learning platform? What makes you nervous about it? Because I bet every student is going to have some of the exact same reservations about doing this, just like a teacher is.
Yeah.
So then you said that on a professional level, like from the administration, there's been no direction about more struggling kids. But for you as a teacher who you know that you're going to have to be teaching remedial math, is there something that you personally have in mind to approach those kids differently?
Well, we're going to do, when we get together for our live synchronous sessions, we're going to do problems together. The difference with the course that I'll be doing that's remedial is because Algebra 1 in the Parkway School District is based on standards, and these kids that are in my section are kids that took algebra in the school year or in summer school and didn't finish maybe one or two standards. And so they're all going to be at slightly different places. So I am going to have to schedule time more one-on-one with them in order to teach them different concepts or push out different videos to them, different practices to each kid, and then have them come together for assessments for their specific topic. So that one's going to take a lot of personalization.
Right.
Do you think, I don't know if this would happen, but if a student, say, does perform poorly, do you think there could be parents wanting to contest the grade that they're getting because of the situation? Like saying, well, they didn't do well in the class because of, they can't learn online or something, and then they want to try to argue their grades. I don't know if that could happen or not, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like anything could happen because anything is happening all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, yes, I think there's a way that can happen. But I also think teachers are putting in different platforms, such as discussions, such as online practice where they get unlimited attempts, different things that will help them be successful that maybe they don't actually get when they're in the classroom. I mean, most of us don't give unlimited quiz attempts in a classroom. But I
Right.
am going to be doing that for my AP class. I'm going to give them self checks, after each section just to see, do you know what you're talking about? And I'm going to let them take it an unlimited amount of time so that they understand the material rather than worried about what the grade is. So I think it's a different way to think through the process.
Hmm.
So in light of grades, then has there been any like talk about options of making courses pass fail as opposed to having it be based on grades?
Nope.
Hmm.
No. And typically, like in math, we do 90% assessments, 10% miscellaneous stuff. And I think that might be still like, it might be pretty similar to that even in the online world, because we are going to be doing different, making different concessions in different areas. Like I was saying, you get to take a retest. Maybe instead of an assessment, obviously there won't be paper pencil assessments. Maybe to understand chapter 4 in something, it's a project that they have to create, a Google slide. Maybe, I think through AP Stat, and I haven't gotten here yet, but maybe I decide to have them for a probability unit create some kind of a game, an online game, or some kind of or it could be one that they create, at home and take pictures and put into a Google slide and share it with everybody. So there's different, it's thinking through how you're going to assess. how, rather than just that typical paper pencil test. Some teachers were tossing around ideas of having a kid describe how to solve a problem. Like you take a video, a kid would be working a problem and talking through the process of what it is, and that's part of their test. I mean, there's some pretty cool ideas out there. It's just the teacher rethinking their profession, which is tough for someone who's been teaching for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was gonna be like one of my questions actually. Like, how are you gonna be like administering these tests through online classes where, um, previously when I take stats, like when I work out a problem, like I use up half the page sometimes and stuff like that. And then if I were to make a mistake, my teachers and professors were actually able to like hunt down where I made mistakes and like mark it and stuff like that. Like, is it gonna be like just multiple choice on the screen? Like, how is this gonna work now?
So I'm not 100% at that point yet. I've got my outline of what I want to do, and I'm getting to the test part. But I'm looking at my old tests, and I see that I try to keep them very similar to the AP exam, where it's 50% of it is multiple choice and 50% is free response. So you can still do online assessment, multiple choice, fill in the blank, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
through our online learning system. Um, you can still do free response problems, and kids can still write them out using that Cami program. I could make everybody's test a PDF. They sit there, they write it out because they can touch their screen and write it out, and then send it in. So that is still a possibility. It could be that they type in a Google Doc, how to solve something, maybe create, I think through AP Stat when they're doing creating an experiment or doing a simulation, you can type all that out. It takes a bit, but you can type it out. On the AP exam, kids had to type it out, or they could write it out and just send a picture in. So it's just getting kids familiar with how to use the technology, and it's getting teachers familiar with how to use the technology.
Hmm. That's great.
Do you
Technology.
think that once because I know with at least offices, a lot of the transition from work to or work from home, people are realizing that it's very efficient or that it's better almost in some capacity than being at the office. Uh, you know, some people are arguing that once we go back to normal, that some of this will linger and that some companies won't ever go back. I wonder if you have any thoughts on if this could be the case for some schools where they're realizing, oh, well, this actually works better for some students. Maybe let's give them the option to do a virtual learning. Or if you think that once this is a vaccine or whatever, this will just immediately revert back. Do you think any of those changes are going to linger around or change the way learning is done in the classroom?
I I don't see us ever going back to quote unquote what it was before COVID. Like in almost any sense of society. Um, if you think of things through the business scope, you think about how much money a business is saving by not heating, renting a building, providing electricity, custodians. I mean, there's a whole lot of expenditures that a business gets to save because they don't have to worry about a physical building and keeping it maintained. Something similar could be said about schools. Unfortunately, we have cafeteria workers, bus drivers, janitors that are all out of a job because we are going virtual. The
Mm-hmm.
cafeteria workers, they can still use to make the pickup meals for students, but they won't need as many possibly. So then there's those individuals that are going to need to be furloughed and so that they can get unemployment. And that's an unfortunate side effect, I guess is the word, of doing the virtual learning. So
Yeah,
some schools were already offering virtual classes. And so I guess this is going to be giving all students that opportunity to see what a virtual class could be. Um, However, I would asterisk that with depending on the teacher, because each virtual class is going to be set up, different. And just like they are already in college, you guys said that you had taken some classes virtually or knew people that took classes virtually in college. Each one set up a little bit differently. Some are more engaging than others, some are more difficult than others. And it takes a certain level of perseverance. I can't wait for the day that we can be back in the classroom and teaching students again. But that will also look different because I don't think initially when we go back, you can't do, group activities, passing, like sharing cards or doing some kind of card sort or vocabulary game with another person, sharing, when you're touching something else and then giving it to somebody else, that's going to be a no-no for a while. So it's rethinking how everything works. Kind of
No,
mind blowing.
didn't consider like all the other secondary jobs that are involved with school, like bus driver and things. I didn't even consider like there's like a whole economy hidden away that's being basically just disappeared. Like these people just overnight now no longer have a job to do. So probably same for me too. I mean, since I've been working at home, I don't go out and eat. Whenever I lived or worked at the office, I would just go eat for lunch with people. But now I'm not spending any of those businesses because I don't have any need to go out and eat lunch somewhere. I mean, there's probably something that people don't consider whenever they're seeing the GDP drop so much, is that there's a lot that's being disrupted that you probably just never even think of in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, I view it
Yeah,
as more like a
it's more.
shift than anything. Because even though like you're not going out and eating and stuff like that, there has been a spike in terms of like food delivery services like Grubhub and stuff like that.
True.
We tried to eat local was one of the big things that we tried to do during this. Not that chain restaurants aren't good, but we want to try to save the more local restaurants that are the mom and pop type restaurants. So we would try to do those, and then we would order out from there just to try to give them some money. And we still tipped during the process. But we were fortunate enough that both of us still have jobs. There's a lot of families that aren't going to be in that situation or aren't in that situation. And that is, that's not good.
Yeah.
And there's also companies that are organizations that are trying to help those people that find themselves suddenly out of work or in need of assistance, whether it be financial assistance or food assistance or housing assistance. I know a friend of mine has created a giant list of different organizations so that she can give it to people and people can know, like, have some direction of where to reach out.
Do you think that the government is doing enough to respond to these needs that a lot of Americans are facing? Or do you think they're responding with enough or quick enough?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would say if you were in that situation, you would probably think not quick enough, because I would imagine if you're in that situation, you're used to a certain type of lifestyle, and then when you find out that you're not able to maintain that lifestyle, it could be traumatic. I also know that there are people that were making more money on unemployment than they did in their real job because of the boost that the government did.
Right.
So that was one big debate too, is, about that, because are people really going to go and try to find another job if they're making more money on unemployment? That's been a debate for years for various things. But then I also know people that have started driving for Instacart or Grubhub because you can make money right now in that. Unfortunately, you put yourself at risk also. So like you have to
All right.
outweigh the pros and cons on that. Is it worth doing that and putting yourself at risk for the money to be able to support your house and have whatever luxuries that you need or needs that you have fulfilled?
It's amazing that people have to make that decision. Like, I have to risk my health just to try to, keep my family alive. It's like, it's
Hmm.
crazy that that's the world we're living in.
Yep.
Yeah, and I will say that in light of local businesses, for my family, for our restaurant, we have definitely seen a dip in business. It's like cut by like anywhere between 30 and 40% from before COVID. But the people who are still coming in and still ordering takeout, like I've never seen people more appreciative and more like thankful whenever they come pick up the food, and like everybody's leaving tips uh, on carry out orders when in the past it'd be relatively rare. So it's a nice thing to see that even though yeah businesses a lot of local businesses are seeing dips in business, this generally the people are very kind and supportive about that. So that's nice to see.
Yeah. It's always nice not to have to make a meal. I know that. I'd rather go buy it.
Yeah, whenever I don't have leftovers to eat for lunch, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll have to go buy some food. um, but you mentioned that you were really excited to go back to in-person classes. I mean, understandably, that's for a lot of in a lot of aspects, it's just like objectively better than online courses. But I'm curious for you on more of a personal level because you're also a parent of two, and even though they're not super young, they're still kids. Uh, do you have any sort of like conflicting emotions or thoughts about reopening schools because you have both the perspective of a teacher and a parent of two?
Well, I'll share something with just you guys here, but, and I realize this is a podcast, but my own two children super want to go back to school. And what we had to weigh as a family is the risk of me going to school in one district and them going to school in another district and us coming back together, bringing all those exposures back into one house worth it. That was a really tough decision to think through and make. Um, and so what we decided is because I want to honor my children's hopes and let them have that socialization, um, that I would allow them to go back in a hybrid model for the 2 days a week. And it's only 50% capacity in classes with masks on. I mean, there was all these different stipulations. Uh, but then I chose virtual if I can do that, which I'm not even sure if I'll get that opportunity if we go back in Parkway as a school, because being department lead, I don't know if I can be a virtual department leader uh, if I've got some people in building and some people out of building. So that's what we chose as a family to try to minimize the amount of exposures.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a
Hmm.
good point.
So you could potentially move your kids to a different district and where they do allow going to in-person classes, is what you're saying?
My kids are in a different district than I teach, so
Oh,
they
okay.
have the opportunity. Like, so what their district chooses is possibly different than what my district chooses. So
Hmm.
currently, everyone in the household is on virtual learning for the first however long, um, and then it gets re-looked at. So when it gets re-looked at is when if they go hybrid, they could do that, and I can maintain virtual possibly. But we'll see. We've been very careful through this whole thing. At one point we were wiping the packages down, when the numbers were, I think it was like 2.2 was the exponential rate that they were growing at. We were wiping packages down because that's pretty crazy how quick it was growing at
Yeah,
one point.
I
Now
remember
that it's
ordering
down to
something.
like 1.2, I think, or something like that, we don't wipe it down as much, but we definitely are cautious with what we do. We have the hand sanitizer right by the front door. We have the hand sanitizer in the cars. We've got the Clorox wipes ready to go. I mean, we've been a cautious family, but yet tried to still maintain, somewhat of a life of that we're accustomed to. I let my
Yeah.
youngest kid play baseball. They were able to play some games in Jefferson County, and so we would do the baseball game. And yes, I sat near the exact same people every single time. I didn't try to mix around a lot. Uh, the kids, you know, they maintained some distance, but at the same time, it's baseball, and inevitably you're walking through the exact same gates and the exact same way to get on and off the field. So um, that was a little bit of a different experience for us those first couple games, just making yourself vulnerable.
Um, so did Parkway mention anything about um, if they do have any like at this point very temporary and up in the air plans to go back in person?
Oh yeah, we've got different phases. So I think Parkway's a 1, 2, 3 phase. I don't know if it's Parkway or Limber because one uses 1, 2, 3, one uses ABC. Uh, but there's a 3 phase process. The most extreme phase is all virtual, and then the second phase would go to a hybrid model where kids are in schools like every other day with one day off that everybody's doing virtual learning. And then the lowest restricted model is people that want to be in the building 5 days a week would be in the building 5 days a week, but there would still be a virtual, if people want to stay on virtual campus, let's say, there'd still be that opportunity. I can say as numbers from the Parkway School District as a whole, there's a percentage for Parkway, and I don't know the exact number, so let's just say the exact number is 35% for the whole district, okay, that wants to be virtual. But for different areas in the district, the north area, the west area, the central area, and south area, there are different percentages of those willing to be that are willing to go in person. And for the north area, we have a very high number, higher than the overall Parkway number, that want to stay virtually, which I thought was pretty interesting. But you also have to think of the demographics of the north area population compared to the demographics of a west or a central or a south area.
Do you think that has anything to do with like, because doesn't North have more kids from different like districts? Because we used to shuttle in a lot of kids from the city of St. Louis as opposed to just like Brooklyn Heights and everything.
Not anymore. We don't have the numbers that I think people think we have that used to be the voluntary transfer system from back in the day. But the north area zip codes, if you look at any of the COVID websites, are zip codes that were hit harder than the, let's say, south area zip codes. And I think, so if you go back to the thought that a north area person then has a higher chance that they know someone that was personally affected with this, that's going to influence their decision on what they're going to do with their education. So through that mindset, I would say that's why more North families were choosing virtual instruction, is because they have a more personal connection to COVID.
And so with these phases that they've laid out then for reopening Parkway, do they have any sort of like contingency plans for if and when
when they close it, if
yeah.
they're in a hybrid schedule and they start getting so many students that show up that are getting sick, not show up to class but are reporting that they're sick, then they go into different shutdown modes. It could be as small as 3 days, it can be as large as 14 days. So yes, they have thought through contingency plans.
3 days seems kind of short, but I'm sure they have the reasons.
I agree. I agree. But it also depends on, I mean, I'm trying to think through like if a student gets tested, let's say on Monday, but then they don't get the test back till the following Monday. Well, you're already 7 days in. So a 3-day closure would hit your 10 days after, you know. I mean, there are those kind of thought process, I guess, that could have affected why they chose 3 days. I was not on the super secret committee in order to think through that. I wouldn't want that responsibility, to be
Yeah.
honest. So that's I feel like I know a lot. I know a little about a lot, which can be dangerous. But I don't know a lot about a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This entire
I mean,
situation, it just kind of feels like
uh,
societal triage, where it's just like, I don't remember who I was talking to about this the other day, but it's like, it feels like everywhere in every field there's just holes popping up, and we're just scrambling to try to plug them up one at a time, while not really getting to the root of the issue. Where it's just like,
Yeah.
like you mentioned
It's a
earlier.
very reactive.
I was just gonna say, like you mentioned earlier, people just really need to start to take this more seriously.
Well, one of the problems is that the coronavirus, at least what I've heard, is that it can take 7 to 14 days before you show symptoms. I think humans in general are very bad at just like understanding that. Because like, if you don't look sick, you don't feel sick, then just like when I see somebody that doesn't look sick at all, I'm just naturally going to be relaxed, not worried about it. But that's not the case. Like they could literally be transmitting it. So you have to take those precautions without really seeing the risk. And I think that's something that's still, even me, I have trouble recognizing that fact. Like, I'll tell my sister, like, you shouldn't go and see our dad, even though you look fine, because, that's a vulnerable person. Okay. You need to just assume that you have it. Assume that I have the coronavirus. I need to wear a mask because it could be the reality. So it is, I think that's
Yep.
causing the
I kind of
problem.
wish there were more people like you then, sir.
Well, you know, it would definitely be nice if we could get back to normal, but I don't know. It does seem like it's kind of a long shot.
Yeah, it's going to be a while, unfortunately. I saw a post somewhere when this all started from a superintendent who made a comment about, we might be doing things extreme right now to help, but you can't. But if we weren't this extreme, we'll never know if it worked or not. But if we didn't do things, you would definitely see the repercussions of it. So it's better to be cautious and make more sacrifices in order to help the overall than it is to just do the bare minimum and then things just go crazy. It was, and we'll never know if we did too much or too little, to be perfectly honest, until hindsight. And hindsight right now is like we did too little. Because I would have hoped we would have been out of this by now. And if some of the parents that complain about, having to have their kids at home learning virtually are some of the same parents that complain about having to wear a mask. So that's what I was saying earlier about you can't have it both ways. Do you want your kid back in class learning, having the life that you're accustomed to, but wearing a stinking mask? Or do you want to not wear a mask and have a different lifestyle? That's what I think, we need to get through everybody's head. Stop complaining, just do it so we can get back to or at least somewhat back to where we were.
Yeah, it really has become so. I don't think I've ever seen something become so political as the coronavirus. It seems like even from the beginning, it became political pretty quickly. And I just think
I don't understand how it went that way so quickly. I don't watch the news because it's so doom and gloom. And so I try not to say that there's a political side to it, but for some reason it's, I'm part of this party, so this is why I'm not going to do it. And it's like, no, this is about health. Don't think about it as politics. Think about it as taking care of the human race.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, just being patriotic, like caring about your fellow American, like your community. I feel like that's something that, most Americans can agree with. And I think they would. Like at the beginning, I think if you said that to them before this, you'd be like, yeah, I mean, I care about the community and I want to help them. But something changed somewhere and it really divided us.
yeah, and people making comments like survival of the fittest. It's like, what? We are not in the, 1400s or something. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What was your
And
reaction?
imagine if
So,
the
I
virus
don't know.
was worse. Like if it was one of those, I mean, there could be a pandemic that does kill, 60% the people
Yeah.
who get it or something. Like that's not far from possible. I mean, it seems like, I mean, especially now we've done this, but like if that happened, we would have been, I mean, this is sort of a test run, people call it, but it could have been I mean, that virus could still hit someday. So,
Well, I feel like some people think of this as some political parties, Thanos and snapping their fingers, and all of a sudden there's this massive virus that's killing half the
yeah,
population. It's not a movie, but like seriously,
I'm
I don't
just
know.
wondering if I know for every person it's a little different, but when did you first, I mean, when did you first hear about the coronavirus and did you think anything of it before it kind of hit America?
Yes, I heard about it like in, I guess it was more February, probably more, yeah, February, because I have friends, because I'm an AP reader, I know people all over the country. Um, and so people started talking about it up in New York that were coming. And we actually had a spring break trip planned to go up there for our anniversary and hang out with the sister in law that's up there. And that was mid March. And the Monday, we were supposed to be leaving on a Friday. The Monday of that week, I looked at my husband. I'm like, things aren't going great in New York. I don't think we should be driving across the country to go to a city it's starting to look like a war zone. Like I'm not feeling that even if we stayed at the sister's house, which is an hour from uh, downtown New York City, it's like I I don't know if that's far enough away. Like, and the way things are closing, it's not like we can go to the city and do anything. And so we decided that Monday to cancel our trip. Uh, and actually, it was a neighbor who I was walking with that kept making comments like a week or so before, like, because she knows I'm not a huge news watcher. Are you seeing what's happening there? Are you sure you really want to go there? So then when I started investigating, I'm like, hey, maybe we don't want to do this trip. Um, so it was that was eye opening.
It was scary for a while
Yeah,
in New
New
York
York was
City.
scary.
Hmm.
It was like
Yeah.
something out of an apocalyptic movie. It was like
Yeah.
they
I
had
mean,
those death trucks where they had to have like parking lots dedicated to storing the bodies of people who died from COVID. And yet you have people who are saying that's all fake and that they're doing that just to as a publicity stunt to make Donald Trump look bad.
yeah, it's pretty scary. I know people that live there and they were, in lockdown mode. And yet one of them still had somebody get sick and they were in there, in a different isolated room in order to uh, help control the spread of it to the rest of the family. It definitely had that feeling of, watching a movie about the Spanish flu or the Black Plague or something to that, or Outbreak or Contagious. I mean, there's so many movies that kind of have that same thought process that it's like, holy crap, this is real.
Yeah, it
But
seems
it
like
also
we could have
takes
stopped it
somebody
in April.
knowing somebody there. Like if you just watch it on the news, you think oh, that could be contrived or uh, overexposed, like it's getting too much media play or whatever the reasoning could be.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, now New York, I mean, they basically, I don't think they have less than 100 new cases a day. I mean, they basically have it under control. And, and I just can't help but feel like we could have stopped it in New York, or that was our opportunity. You know, we saw it coming for a long time. Even, I mean, I heard about it in January, and just seeing some videos from China that were coming out is when I kind of had like that, that oh no moment, where it's like this is actually something that's, this is not just another, like SARS or something that's just gonna kind of fizzle out, you know, just because the reactions of countries have been so drastic. Like they go like Italy, that was the second thing. It's like you hear people from Italy, like the stories, you're like, oh my goodness, what is this thing? It just keeps getting closer and closer, and then so yeah, we also had a trip to New York that we canceled just because there's nothing you don't want to go to New York and just sit in the hotel,
Yeah.
Well, I'm turning a big birthday in a couple weeks, and my plan was that I was going to go with friends, and we were going to go out of the country to an all-exclusive thing, but that didn't happen. That isn't happening. So, I mean, the birthday's still happening, but I don't get to go and celebrate it.
Well, happy early birthday to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
happy birthday.
Yeah.
In lockdown.
In lockdown, I know it'll be a happening 40, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, but like we keep talking about the Spanish flu. For anybody who may not have heard, I think there's relatively common knowledge. But for anybody who have not heard, I saw a thing relatively early on during COVID that like during Spanish flu back in 1918, whenever cases were starting to go down a little bit, a lot of cities are in the same predicament that we are in now, where it's like, should we open back up? To what extent? And actually, in this like miniaturized, like maybe even informal case study, the two cities that I saw that were mentioned were St. Louis and Philadelphia, because St. Louis
I saw the same one.
yeah, because St. Louis chose to stay locked down and not have any like large gatherings and everything, whereas Philadelphia decided to have a parade. And then not long after did Philadelphia start hitting more like record high like deaths and cases and stuff from the Spanish flu, whereas St. Louis was still like in that trough of cases.
Kind of like Florida when they opened up the beaches and then they spiked.
Yeah.
Yep. Who would have guessed?
Not just the beaches though. Like Florida has been lax about all
everything.
Yeah, and that's something that some people are talking about. Where it's just like some people are like, yeah, if you're like obviously every state and county and city and everything, all that everywhere is different. It's disingenuous to say that we should have one blanket rule for everywhere. But for the places
Correct.
where restaurants are back open for dine-in, where bars are back open, bowling alleys are back open, like there's no reason that schools shouldn't be open. Or in the flip side, if those are open and that you think it's still too dangerous for schools, then those other places should still be closed. So it's interesting to see that like conflict of interest there for a lot of people. And then for you, Miss Miller, I don't know if you heard about this, but our governor here in Missouri, whenever he was asked about reopening schools, he said that kids will get COVID, and if they do, they're going to go home and they're going to get over it. What was your reaction as both a parent and a teacher to that quote?
I mean, okay. So, yes, will a large percentage of students get over being sick? Sure. So will a large percentage of adults. But is it worth saying, hey, the fittest will survive, oh, well, that kiddo was sick, so I guess that's why they didn't, make it. That's inhumane. It's crazy. It is crazy that people aren't valuing all people.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It's such a backwards way of thinking. Like you said, we're not in medieval times. If we have the ability to save as much people as we can, why shouldn't we?
And
There's
going back to the Spanish flu, sorry, Parker. Real quick, I saw this picture of this family taking a picture during the Spanish flu times, and it's just like firstly, I didn't even realize they had pictures back then, back in 1918. But secondly, it's like they were all wearing masks. Back in 1918, they're all wearing masks during a family picture where there's nobody else around. Like, I don't think they were doing it. They're just like, hey, let's put on the masks just for the lulz. And it's just like thinking, like, yeah, science was around, obviously, back in 1918. But, like, between 1918 and 2020, literally more than 100 years later, there are still, like, there were people taking it more seriously back then there are now. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, sorry, Parker. I had to say that.
Well, all I was going to say is that the virus has only been around less than a year. So even the people that are getting the virus and they're just fine short term, do we know the long term? Like there's some people that are having kidney failure, that are having permanent lung damage due to the coughing. I think we only will know that. Like there's really we don't know what will happen 5 years, 10 years. Maybe if you get COVID as a young person, whenever you're in your 50s, 60s, that's when you start to have like, okay, you have breathing problems because you had COVID when you were in your 20s. You know, we don't know what could happen. So why take that risk and be like, okay, well, you'll be fine. Kids are practically immune to the virus, as some people in the government claim. So, why take that chance? There's no reason to. It's 2020.
Yeah, that's crazy. We are starting to run out of time a little bit here. So, do any of you guys have any other closing remarks or questions for Ms. Miller?
I had one question that I've been wanting to ask. I think like online courses, like one pro is that you're not limited by class size anymore. And, I'm sure people in different districts will, want to learn AP stat from you. And maybe some students from Parkway will want to learn from, somewhere a teacher from like California or something. Like, are there talks of being like these courses being open for other students to listen to besides Parkway?
Well, I think anything you put on YouTube, you can have other people listen to whatever your talks are. Based on the learning management system that a school district chooses, those are unique codes for just that district to be able to use, just like Google Classroom only works if you have for us, only works if you have a Parkway Schools email. I can't have somebody that goes to Truman log into my AP stat class because they're taking intro to stat in college and they want to use my notes, which I've had former students ask. So I have a bunch of friends that have videos, again, all over the country. And so I'm not making every video for AP Stat. I'm going to have them learn from different teachers. If I find a video that I like better, that's maybe shorter, more engaging, whatever the reason, I'll put that in my virtual course for my students to be able to learn from. That doesn't have to be just me talking, which is also tough for as a teacher because teachers think that they're amazing and that we're the only ones that can reach and teach our students. So that's another mindset that even I've had to work on personally.
Well, you are amazing, so
Thank
you don't
you.
have to work on it.
I try.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Any last comments you want to leave off with, Mrs. Miller, about reopening schools or COVID in general?
Wear your masks so we can all get back to normal. Like, honestly, wear your masks, wash your hands.
Amen.
It just, and don't make it a political thing. It is just a human race thing. So I'd like to get back in the classrooms. Parents want their kids back in the classrooms. Let's work together to get to that goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, because I know we're going through another spike right now. Hopefully people will realize this isn't just some fake stuff, but obviously, and we'll see. We'll see. But
Hindsight's 2020.
Oh, 2020,
Yeah.
look at that.
I hate that number, but that's what they say. Hindsight's 2020, as in perfect vision, not the year 2020. I actually saw a really cute meme that was like, "What's the most hated number?" And it was like 666 was the cartoon, and it was like, well, I used to be the most hated number, and now in 2020 goes, I've taken on that role.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is so true.
Yeah, we've got 3 to 4 more months ahead of us, for better or worse. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you a lot for talking to us about this. It's really insightful to hear about what's going on, not just like on the nationwide level, but on a more micro level with here in St. Louis with the Parkway schools, and really appreciate your insights as both a parent and a teacher, because obviously we're all like